There are moments in the study of history when a text emerges from the distant past and forces the modern world to pause. Not because it announces something new, but because it reveals something ancient that had been quietly lying in the shadows, waiting for the right generation to look closely. The Ethiopian Synaxarium, a monumental work of hagiography and sacred memory preserved for more than 1,000 years, is one such text. It has long been cherished within the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, read daily in monasteries perched on mountain peaks, whispered through incense-filled liturgies, and recopied by hand in scriptoria where the flicker of oil lamps were the only witness. For centuries, the outside world treated it as a regional religious calendar. But those who listened deeply, priests, monks, scholars, and elders, knew it carried something far more extraordinary. For contained within its sprawling accounts is a chapter rarely discussed outside Ethiopia, a narrative so old that even the oldest manuscripts seem only to echo earlier oral memories. It is a description of events that, according to its tradition, occur before the first day of creation itself. Long before light was separated from darkness, long before time began its march, long before the earth cooled, before the seas rose, before the angels took their ranks, the Synaxarium preserves a story of what existed, who acted, and how divine realities unfolded in the primordial silence. And only recently have historians and theologians begun piecing together the significance of those passages, using philology, comparative Near Eastern studies, and ancient African cosmologies to understand what they reveal. Understanding the meaning and origin of this account requires retracing Ethiopia's unique religious history. Unlike the Western world, which often reads the biblical creation narrative as a complete beginning, Ethiopian Christianity inherited a vast and ancient world of traditions. Some came from early Jewish communities rooted in the Aksumite Empire, others traveled from Egypt with the Desert Fathers, still others came from the Syriac world, where stories of pre-cosmic events were once common. Ethiopia did not simply adopt these ideas, it preserved and expanded them, turning the country into a living museum of late antique spirituality. The Synaxarium therefore became a fusion of scripture, oral tradition, monastic visions, and ancient cosmological speculation. The passage that intrigues modern scholars describes a time before the creation of heaven and earth. It speaks of the existence of divine mysteries, of hidden realms, and of spiritual beings who existed not in time but in a form of eternal present. In the Ethiopian tradition, this primordial state is not described as nothingness. Instead, it is portrayed as an unfathomable depth in which God was fully present, radiant but unseen, expressing a form of existence beyond space. This echoes older Near Eastern cosmologies where the divine was understood to dwell in an unbounded expanse, but the Ethiopian account adds something unique, an emphasis on the divine word existing before all things, long before it was spoken into creation. The Synaxarium preserves an early medieval interpretation that the angels were not created on the first day, as some traditions suggest, but long before physical reality. In this view, the first day of creation marks not the beginning of existence but the beginning of material order. Before that, the spiritual hierarchy already existed, though without time, measurement, or motion. This interpretation aligns with certain writings attributed to early Coptic mystics, including those associated with the school of Alexandria. Yet the Ethiopian version diverges by framing these beings not merely as attendants, but as participants in a sacred drama preceding creation. One of the most profound claims in the Synaxarium is the description of a celestial rebellion occurring before the creation of the physical universe. Though similar stories appear in Syriac and Jewish mystical texts, the Ethiopian narrative gives it a distinct cosmological context. It suggests that pride arose in the heart of one of the highest spiritual beings while the universe was still unformed. This being, seeing his own radiance, sought to ascend higher than the place assigned to him, forgetting that his light was only a reflection of the divine. This rebellion, in the Ethiopian account, did not take place within created space but within a spiritual realm outside time. Only after this event did God initiate the process of creating the heavens and the earth. This interpretation radically shifts the traditional timeline. In many Western narratives, the fall of the angels occurs after the creation, typically linked to the early days of humanity. But the Ethiopian Synaxarium insists that the disorder began earlier, that the cosmic drama predates the physical world. The fall becomes not just a reaction to human origins, but a core reason why the material universe was shaped the way it was, structured, layered, disciplined. In this view, creation becomes an act of both beauty and containment, establishing order where rebellion had emerged. That pre-creation narrative would not feel out of place in early Jewish mysticism, particularly the Merkaba tradition, nor in the writings of the 4th century Egyptian monks who believed that spiritual warfare preceded human history. Yet Ethiopia's version is older in spirit and distinct in structure. Because Ethiopia remained geographically isolated during key centuries of Christian development, it preserved elements that disappeared elsewhere. This allowed uncommon cosmologies to survive, fossilized in monastery libraries untouched by Roman or Byzantine editing. Another remarkable feature of the Synaxarium's account is its portrayal of God's pre-cosmic deliberation. It describes the divine decision to create the world not as instantaneous, but as a deliberate act filled with internal mystery. This recalls ancient African philosophical traditions, particularly those found in Nubia and the Horn of Africa, in which creation is preceded by a moment of divine contemplation. In these older cosmologies, the Creator sits within a silent, infinite sea of potential, the primordial waters, before speaking order into existence. Ethiopia's Christian scholars, influenced by both local tradition and imported theological texts, wove these ideas into their understanding of Genesis. The Synaxarium's narrative also suggests that divine attributes existed before the universe, but were not yet manifested. Mercy existed, but there was no one to receive it. Judgment existed, but there was no one to be judged. Creativity existed, but the canvas of reality had not yet been unfurled. This pre-creation metaphysics reveals an ancient attempt to explain why God created anything at all. According to Ethiopian theologians, creation was not needed but desired, an expression of divine generosity rather than divine necessity. Perhaps the most intriguing element appears in certain manuscript traditions preserved in monasteries such as Debre Damo and Debre Libanos. These manuscripts describe how, before creating the physical world, God revealed certain mysteries to the spiritual beings so they could witness His glory. A few scholars interpret this as a remnant of early apocalyptic literature, similar to the Book of Enoch, which was preserved in full only in Ethiopia. This connection is important because Ethiopia is the only country where the Book of Enoch remained part of the religious canon for centuries. The themes resonate: visions of heavenly realms, primordial beings, and pre-cosmic secrets. It is therefore unsurprising that Ethiopian scribes drawing on Enochic traditions would incorporate similar themes into their own liturgical histories. The significance of this pre-creation narrative extends beyond theology. It shaped Ethiopian culture. It influenced art, where angels are often painted not as beings entering history, but as beings who predated. It influenced liturgy, where prayers speak of divine realities before the making of the world. It influenced ethics, where the fall of the spiritual realm becomes a warning about pride, hierarchy, and obedience. And it influenced Ethiopian identity, situating the country not as a peripheral member of the Christian world, but as a guardian of ancient wisdom. Modern historians examining these passages emphasize their value not as literal cosmology, but as windows into early African intellectual life. They show how Ethiopian thinkers interpreted Genesis not through the lens of Greek philosophy, as many European theologians did, but through their own cultural memory and inherited sacred stories. They demonstrate how Africa contributed to global theological development, not as a receiver, but as a preserver and interpreter. Recent scholarship has begun analyzing the oldest Ge'ez manuscripts of the Synaxarium using digital imaging, revealing textual variants that suggest the pre-creation material may be older than previously thought. Some passages appear to have been copied from even earlier works, possibly from lost treatises of the Desert Fathers or from early Judeo-Christian communities in the region. This reinforces the idea that Ethiopia was not an isolated outpost, but a central crossroads of early religious thought. Ultimately, what the Ethiopian Synaxarium reveals is not merely a story about what happened before the first day of creation. It reveals how ancient people understood their place in the cosmos, how they sought to explain the mystery of existence, and how they imagined the divine drama that unfolded before the world began. It preserves a worldview in which time, matter, spirit, and destiny intertwine in ways modern minds rarely consider. And it reminds the world that the history of ideas is far older, richer, and more global than often assumed. For centuries, this narrative remained hidden in plain sight, recited in monasteries but unknown to the wider world. Today, as scholars return to ancient African texts with renewed respect, the Synaxarium stands as a testament to humanity's oldest questions: what came before us? Why are we here? Who shaped the universe? And what mysteries lie beyond the veil of time? The Ethiopian Synaxarium does not claim to answer these questions definitively. Instead, it preserves the memory of an ancient attempt to approach them with reverence, imagination, and wonder. That perhaps is its greatest contribution. It invites us not simply to learn history, but to re-enter a world where the boundaries between heaven and earth, time and eternity, known and unknown, were far more fluid than we imagine. And in doing so, it ensures that the oldest stories of humanity continue to whisper across the ages.